A is for Arches, a Utah alphabet, written by Becky Hall, illustrated by Catherine Larson. A is for Arches, a Utah alphabet, written by Becky Hall and illustrated by Catherine Larson. We'll start with Utah's arches, made from wind, frost, and rain, nature's rocky sculptures, and art that can't remain. Utah's most famous arches are near Moab at Arches National Park. These are nature's sandstone sculptures, formed by freezing and thawing, by flowing water, and by wind. After many years, arches fall apart because their process that forms them also destroys them. New arches are slowly forming all the time. The world's longest natural arch is Utah. It's not clear where, though. The decision depends on the way the arch is measured. Two arches compete for this honor: Landscape Arch, measuring between 291 and 306 feet in Arches National Park, and Kolob Arch, measuring between 292 and 310 feet in Zion National Park. Some of this measuring was done by hand, and more recently it was done electronically. The desert ecosystem where these arches are found is unique. The soil can be so fragile that it never recovers from human footsteps. The only poisonous lizard in the United States, the Gila monster, is found here. Other common animals of the area include mule deer, coyote, gray fox, ground squirrels, colored lizards, and rattlesnakes. Busy bees, that's what we are. Our symbol is the hive. From mining to technology, it helps our state survive. The state insect is the honeybee. On the flag, bees buzz around a yellow hive. An early name for the state was Deseret, which means honeybee. Utah's nickname is the Beehive State. The state motto is Industry, which means hard work. In 1847, Mormon pioneers settled the Salt Lake City in an attempt to find religious freedom. They had to be resourceful and industrious in order to survive in the harsh desert. They grew their own food, produced as much as they could for themselves, and mined the nearby hills. They tried to be self-sufficient, and at one point they even wanted to be a separate country. Found on the state seal and the flag, it makes sense that industry was chosen in 1959 as Utah's motto. The rock and mineral of the state, coal and copper, begin with C. They're found in mines both north and south. Come search for them with me. The world's first open-pit copper mine is near Salt Lake City in Bingham Canyon. Called the richest hole in Earth, it's covered more than 1,900 acres and is 2½ miles wide and 3/4 of a mile deep. Since 1906, over 6 billion tons of material have been removed, including gold and silver. A mountain once stood where now there is a deep hole. The state rock is coal, and the mines are located in central and southeastern Utah. Although Brigham Young and his followers started the mines, many of the miners were brought to Utah from Italy, China, Finland, Greece, Japan, and Mexico. That is how such a variety of people from all over the world settled in central Utah. D. Utah does have its own Dixie. Before the Civil War began, the state's leader, Brigham Young, wanted Utah to be more independent and produce its own cotton. He did not want to rely on the battling southern states, the original Dixie. In October 1860, he sent settlers to southern Utah to start a new Dixie where they could grow cotton. The settlers named their community St. George after the local leader, George A. Smith. They built a cotton factory that began producing cloth and cotton stuffing by 1867. The factory stayed open until 1910. Today, this area is still called Utah's Dixie. Did you know there are two Dixies? Utah has its very own. Settled in the 1860s, here cotton once was grown. Rocky Mountain elk is at Hardware Ranch it's found. To see this gentle giant beast, you cannot make a sound. Shh. The state mammal is the Rocky Mountain elk, which native people called wapiti. The males or bull elk have antlers that they shed each year. The bulls average 6 feet in height, 9 feet in length, and may weigh as much as 950 pounds. The females are smaller. The elk live mostly in the mountains, but come into the valleys during the winter, eating grass, leaves, and tender tree branches. At Hardware Ranch is Hiram, the elk are protected. The State Department of Natural Resources feed as many as 700 elk each winter. This prevents Utah's state mammal from starving and local ranches from losing precious trees and bushes. F is our Four Corners, where 4 western states all meet. If you go there at any time, you'll feel the desert's heat. Four Corners is the only place in the United States where 4 states touch. These are Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. They meet on the Navajo Reservation. F also stands for the Family Research Center in downtown Salt Lake City. It is the #1 place in the world for genealogical research. If you want to learn more about your family history, go there or visit their website at www.familysearch.org. They have over 2 million microfilms of records from more than 97 countries. Many of the records are protected in vaults dug deep in the granite mountainside of Little Cottonwood Canyon outside Salt Lake City. The California gull is G. This gull is Utah's bird. It saved the settlers' crops, a tale you might have heard. In 1848, during the pioneers' first year in the Salt Lake Valley, there was a disastrous June frost. They replanted crops, but crickets swarmed the fields, devouring everything, even nibbling on ladies' cotton skirts. The gulls appeared out of nowhere and ate the bugs, saving the settlers' crops. Because of this miraculous event, the California gull was proclaimed the Utah state bird in 1955. H is for the handcarts the settlers pulled to Zion. Most folks could not walk that far, but they kept on trying. Many pioneers pulled or pushed handcarts to Zion, which was an early name for Utah. 10 handcart companies bought 3,000 people from 1856 to 1860. Each cart held 400 to 500 pounds of food, bedding, clothing, and cooking utensils. It took 2 strong people to pull them. 5 people were assigned to each cart. Adults were allowed 17 pounds of personal items, and children were allowed 10. A few ox-drawn wagons carried extra baggage, including 1 public tent for every 20 people. The pioneers' success proved that using handcarts was an efficient and an inexpensive way to move large numbers of people westward. I stands for irrigation. That's what the settlers used. When you live in the desert land, there's not much else you choose. Irrigation is woven into the history of Utah. When Brigham Young led the first settlers to the Salt Lake Valley, he stressed the importance of water. He encouraged them to grow crops on small parcels of land. Ditches caught the runoff from the mountain snows, and the water master, a respected community leader, oversaw the distribution of water. By 1865, the desert bloomed because of the 277 canals that provided water for more than 150,000 acres. Even today, many towns still have community irrigation. Large water projects have created reservoirs like Flaming Gorge, Glen Canyon, and Lake Powell. These are called multi-purpose river projects because they are not only used for irrigation of crops, but also for recreation, business, flood control, fish, and wildlife. Jim and Jed, they both are J, traders and explorers too. First white men at Great Salt Lake. In fall they met at rendezvous. The mountain men, Jim Bridger and Jedediah Smith, were among the first white men to enter Utah. Collecting animal pelts from fall through early summer, in the spring they met other trappers at the rendezvous, where they sold what they had stored all year. The rendezvous was a time of celebration. The mountain men danced, sang, and competed in foot races and shooting matches. Jim Bridger was famous for telling tall tales around the campfire. Jedediah Smith was known for losing an ear to a bear when it took his head in its mouth. Today, visitors to Utah can experience the rendezvous at Fort Buenaventura. People dress in authentic mountain men costumes to reenact this spring event. Kolff and Yarvik designed a heart for which was received by Bonnie Clark. For 16 weeks Clark stayed alive. Now, thanks to them, more folks survive. In 1982, Dr. Willem Kolff and Dr. Robert Yarvik developed the first human artificial heart. Barney Clark made medical history when he received that heart at the University of Utah. Made of Dacron polyester, plastic, and aluminum, the Yarvik 7 was a system of compressed air hoses that entered the heart through the chest. Barney Clark lived for 16 weeks while a huge machine pumped blood through his body. Under Dr. Kolff's direction, the University of Utah had developed one of the world's leading artificial organ research centers. L is for the Great Salt Lake. It's saltier than all the rest. People float like corks in there, and the brine shrimp thrive the best. The largest salt lake in Western Hemisphere is the Great Salt Lake. It is what remains of Lake Bonneville, an Ice Age lake that was covered much of Utah and parts of Idaho and Nevada. As it evaporated, the salinity or saltiness increased so that today only brine shrimp and bacteria can survive in it. If you have trouble floating, this is the place to go. The lake is 4 times saltier than the oceans and has enough salt in it to satisfy the world's needs for 1,000 years. Today, visitors drive along the causeway to Antelope Island where they can swim and bob in the water. During the spring and fall, brine shrimp provide food for migrating birds. Depending on the water level, 2 to 5 million shorebirds can be seen around the lake during migration. Antelope Island is also an ideal place for wildlife watching. There is a herd of 600 bison, bighorn sheep, mule deer, pronghorn antelope, and coyotes are also plentiful there. Mormon Tabernacle Choir, a group that travels near and far, singing songs around the world. You must learn who they are. The Mormon Tabernacle Choir is world famous. Tourists travel to hear the 320 volunteers sing at Temple Square in Salt Lake City. The singers are between the ages of 30 and 60 and are limited to 20 years of service. The choir is known for its weekly radio and television shows, top-selling records, 5 gold and 2 platinum albums, the worldwide tours. Begun in 1929, their broadcast is the longest-running radio show in history. The Mormon Tabernacle, the dome-shaped building where the choir has sung for many years, is famous for its excellent acoustics. A pin dropped on the floor can be heard 170 feet away. Since few construction supplies were available, in 1863 its builders had to improvise. Instead of nails, they used wooden pegs and rawhide. The pillars appear to be marble, the benches seem to be oak, the organ pipes look like metal, but this is an optical illusion. They were all painted Utah pine. N is for the native clans, ancient and with us today. Anasazi left behind homes and art they made from clay. Many tribes in Utah represent Native American Indians. There were prehistoric Fremont and Anasazi, but today Goshute, Navajo, Ute and Paiute, Shoshone tribal members live in Utah. The state is named after the Ute people. The original name meant home or location of the mountaintop. Visitors to Utah are delighted by the rock art left behind on the canyon walls. The Anasazi's designs and pictures were either chipped into rock petroglyphs or painted on them pictographs. Their granaries perched on high cliffs, their round ceremonial pits called kivas, and their footprints etched into rock walls are the mysterious remains of a civilization that disappeared from the Four Corners area in Utah almost 800 years ago. O is for the outlaw butch, friendly with the Sundance Kid. Their names are part of Utah's past. At Robber's Roost they hid. Born in 1866 in Beaver, George Leroy Parker is better known as Butch Cassidy. Like Robin Hood, he supposedly stole from the wealthy and gave to the poor. His hideout, known as Robber's Roost, was between Hanksville and Moab. The outlaw trail ran from Mexico to Canada. Because of a distrust of big business and the government, some Utah ranchers were sympathetic toward the outlaws and gave them food and fresh horses. O is also for Ogden, located north of Salt Lake City. It claims to be the oldest settlement in Utah. Originally known as Fort Benaventura, it is started as a trading post in 1844 to 1845 at the mountain man Miles Goodyear. The Pony Express is P. It started long-distance mails. Riders brave the heat and cold, and frightening mountain trails. The Pony Express began in April of 1860 and delivered mail for only 18 months. In that time, the riders galloped 650,000 miles on horseback, carried 34,753 pieces of mail, and lost only one mailbag. They traveled from St. Joseph, Missouri, through Utah to Sacramento, California. Every 10 to 15 miles, the horses were changed. New riders took over after 75 miles. One time, William C. Buffalo Bill Cody rode 322 miles in 21 hours and 40 minutes using 21 horses. In October 1861, the Pony Express ended when the transcontinental telegraph was completed and communication improved. Several of the original Pony Express stations can still be seen along the route in the West Desert near Calico, at Simpson Springs, and the station has been reconstructed. Joe Quinney was a Salt Lake man who loved the mountain snow. He helped to start a local spot where skiers like to go. In 1937, Joe Quinney headed a group of businessmen who formed the Salt Lake Winter Sports Association. Their plan was to start a ski area for local Utahns. In 1938, Alta's first ski lift was installed. Soon after its opening, a single ride cost 25 cents and a day ticket was $1.50. Some said the area was so expensive that the sport was reserved for the rich. Today, Alta is a popular ski resort known for its world-famous powder and fair prices. In the 1800s, Alta was a lively mining town. There were 5,000 residents and 26 saloons. Many other old Utah mining communities like Grafton, Frisco, and Silver Reef are now ghost towns. R is for the railroad trains, which meet at Promontory. Connected both by the coasts by rail, soon people race to tell the story. On May 10, 1869, at Promontory Point, the Central Pacific and the Union Pacific Railroads joined after 4 years of difficult and often dangerous work. Trains then connected the East and West. In celebration, the governor of California attempted to drive the final spike into the track. After he failed 2 times, a railroad worker stepped forward and drove the golden spike in with one whack. Many photographs recorded the moment, and telegraph messages sent word through the country declaring the wonder of the transcontinental railroad. S is for the flower of our state. It grows where it's not hilly. The petals are pearly white. Its name is sago lily. The sago lily is the Utah state flower. Chosen in 1911 by Utah's school children, it grows 6 to 8 inches tall on open grasslands. The flower's white petals have a yellow or pink tinge. The walnut-sized bulbs of the sago lily were eaten by native populations and many of the pioneers alive in their first years of settlement. Another S is Salt Lake City, founded by the Mormons in 1847. It is the state's capital. It is the smallest United States city to have a major symphony, 3 dance companies, and an opera company. It is also home to the professional basketball team, the Utah Jazz. T is topaz, Utah's gem. It sparkles golden brown. When you place it in the light, its color can't be found. Our state gem, topaz, is golden or light brown when found in the ground. It becomes colorless in the sunlight. In the United States, topaz is commonly found in only 3 states, New Hampshire, Colorado, and Utah. It is also used in jewelry and is almost as hard as a diamond. Topaz is also the name for the World War II Japanese-American relocation camp, a ghost town today. In 1942, Topaz was home to about 9,000 Japanese-American citizens when they were forced to move to the desert location near Delta. Most were American citizens, but the United States government feared that they might help Japan during the war, and at the end of the war in 1945, all the Japanese prisoners were released. But in the meantime, most of them had lost their homes, land, businesses, and possessions. U is for the dinosaur, found in 1992. Utah Raptor is its name. Oh, what a beast could do! A local rock collector, Robert Gaston, discovered the Utah Raptor, which lived 125 million years ago. Described as an extraordinary killing machine, this carnivorous or meat-eating dinosaur had a huge 12 to 14 inch long slashing claws and was approximately 8 feet tall and 20 feet long. One unusual characteristic of the Utah Raptor was that it had 4 toes, one of which had a long claw that could be retracted when it ran. This was the claw remained sharp for fighting. Scientists think this dinosaur hunted in packs and successfully attacked larger dinosaurs because of its effective weapons. Found in a remote part of the Arches National Park, the Utah Raptor's bones are now on display at the College of Eastern Utah in Price. Our state fossil, Allosaurus, is found more often in Utah than anywhere else in the world. Another carnivorous dinosaur, it roamed here 160 million years ago and weighed 4 tons and stood on 2 legs. It was 17 feet tall and measured 35 feet long. V is for the town of Vernal, with its dino quarry, where people study fossil bones and tell an ancient story. Vernal, near the Colorado border, is where Dinosaur National Monument is located. Scientists uncovered dinosaur bones from the strata or layers at the dinosaur quarry. These paleontologists carefully dusted away the dirt to reveal bones from 65 million years ago. Right here, the world's most complete dinosaur remains were found. Long ago, this area was an ancient riverbed that probably had quicksand at its bend. Dinosaurs came to drink there and were trapped in the soft sand. Over millions of years, the remains that were encased in the sediment became fossils. From 1909 until 1924, 350 tons of bones and attached rock were removed from the area. This included 23 complete skeletons and parts of hundreds more. The dinosaurs were from 6 to 84 feet long. After 1924, the bones were no longer removed but simply exposed for visitors to view. W. Rising up from the flat desert, the Wasatch Mountains run from the northern boundary to the middle of the state and contain some of the oldest rocks geologists have ever discovered. Some are estimated to be 2 billion years old. The mountains were formed when the Earth's plates were moved and cracked, geologic faulting. They also developed from volcanic activity and glaciation. Most of the state's people live along the western edge called the Wasatch Front. Even today, Utahns rely on the mountain snowmelt for their fresh, clear water. W is also for the Winter Olympic Games, held in Utah in February of 2002. There were 78 medal events. Salt Lake City is the largest city ever to host the Winter Games. The Wasatch Mountains loom above, providing water for the town. The snow collects it all winter long. In spring it melts and rushes down. Letter X is xeriscape, a word that has a funny sound, important for the desert folk who plant upon the driest ground. Xeriscape, pronounced xeriscape, comes from the Greek word xeros, meaning dry. Xeriscape gardening is conservation of water through creative landscaping. It can mean using plants that are drought tolerant and therefore require little water. This is important in Utah because the state is the second driest in the country after Nevada. But Utah does the most watering of all the states, about 250 gallons per person per day. More than 60% of this is for yards. In a typical yard, 18 gallons of water are used per square foot during the growing season. Drought-tolerant plants in the same yard require 3 gallons of water per square foot. Now, doesn't xeriscape gardening make sense? Utah's children know of him. From Nauvoo he came, led settlers to his place, and Brigham Young's his name. Brigham Young led the Mormon pioneers to Utah after they fled from mobs in Nauvoo, Illinois. He organized and directed the settlement of the Salt Lake Valley. He drew up a plan for a city where irrigation, open spaces, and wide streets. With only 2 months of real schooling, he was a carpenter, a painter, and a glazier, a person who works with window glass, as well as a smart businessman and a church leader. He enjoyed dancing, theater, and music. He encouraged cultural events. He oversaw the Mormon settlement of many communities in Utah, Nevada, Wyoming, Arizona, and California, making him one of America's most successful colonizers. Zion National Park is Z. Its canyon walls so steep, pine-filled trails and granite cliffs, and turquoise skies so deep. Although Zion was an early name for the Mormon settlement, it is also Utah's first national park, established in 1919. The Virgin River cuts through Zion Canyon, which is 2,400 feet deep and 1/2 mile wide. One famous hike is through the Narrows, where a person can walk upstream and in place nearly touch the both sides of the canyon with outstretched arms. The ancient Anasazi lived around Zion from 1,500 until 800 years ago. Abandoned cliff houses, rock art, and shipping sites are visible throughout the park. With its variety of landscapes, it's a popular place for visitors from all over the world. Now your trip round Utah's done. From the southern orange desert sand to northern pine-edged mountain lakes, come celebrate this land.